important thing is what's in our minds and in our hearts.
Throughout his reign as Australia's 23rd Prime Minister, Robert Lee Hawke wore his heart on his sleeve, emotionally and flamboyantly.
Any boss who sacks anyone for not turning up today is a bum.
Bob Hawke's rise to political prominence came as his career as president of the ACTU progressed and his reputation as an advocate in the Industrial Commission blossomed, culminating in his dramatic resolution of a strike imposed on crooner Frank Sinatra that threatened to leave the star stranded in Australia.
A year of confrontation and crisis in Australia, with the new anti-apartheid movement flexing its muscles.
In 1971, sport and politics clashed, with the disputed arrival in Australia of the touring Springboks for a rugby test series. Hawke led the union boycott of the Springboks, faced censure for mixing sport and politics, and found himself subjected to death threats and abuse. Bob Hawke resisted several attempts to lure him into the federal political sphere, but the drama of the dismissal of Gough Whitlam in 1975 set him on the path to the Prime Ministership.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen.
Pressure mounted on him to run for office. Again, he chose not to. But in 1982, as Labor floundered in the polls, Hawke took the plunge, winning the seat of Wills comfortably, and immediately being elevated to the shadow cabinet by leader Bill Hayden. Within 2 years, Hawke would unsuccessfully challenge Bill Hayden for the leadership and 12 months later take on the role after a long day of negotiations at Sydney's Boulevard Hotel.
And the millions of Australians who deserve and need a Labor victory and the end of Fraserism will be best served by Bob Hawke now becoming leader.
I have no blood on my hands.
Can you expect people to believe that you didn't know that that meeting was going to take place?
I can expect people to believe that you are a damned impertinent.
On the day Labor appointed Hawke to lead the party, the Prime Minister of the day, Malcolm Fraser, called a snap election, hoping to capitalise on the disruptions within the ALP.
But a drover's dog could lead the Labor Party to victory.
Fraser miscalculated. Hawke swooped, leading Labor to a landslide victory. The team of Bob Hawke and Treasurer Paul Keating at the helm of Australia's economy saw many long-term reforms introduced.
It's a betrayal of your trust if you're not prepared to adhere to the goal of creating the greatest amount of happiness and prosperity and security. By 1990, no Australian child will be living in poverty.
The infamous pilots dispute beginning in August 1989 presented Bob Hawke with one of the biggest challenges to his leadership and to his strong union principles. Mr Hawke defied the unions, giving the companies discounted rates for the use of RAAF aircraft and changing the law to allow foreign pilots and aircraft to fly in Australia. Hawke's popularity declined. Keating challenged, lost, and 12 months later made another successful bid for the Labor leadership. Hawke tendered his resignation from the Parliament and, in his final address, as Prime Minister, declared he left the nation better for his presence in the top office. Few Australians will forget the emotions he brought to the job of being Prime Minister of Australia.
A husband, you don't cease to be a father.
And repeating the sad news tonight with the passing of former Labor leader and Prime Minister of Australia, former President of the ACTU, Robert James Lee Hawke, who passed away earlier this evening. Hawke became leader of the Labor Party in early 1983, taking over from Bill Hayden, as you've just seen in that package. And that very famous interview you saw a clip of there where he chastised Richard Carlton, who said he had blood on his hands tonight, and a stunned Hawke referred to him as a damned impertinent, and the rest of the interview was Hawke at his feisty finest. Earlier this evening, Blanche Del Puget, Bob's wife, released a statement, and my friend and colleague Stephen Conroy is going to read that to Sky viewers.
Today we lost Bob Hawke, a great Australian. Many would say the greatest Australian of the post-war era. He died peacefully at home at the age of 89 years. I and Bob's children, Sue, Stephen, Roslyn and the stepson Lewis, and his grandchildren will hold a private funeral. A memorial service will be held in Sydney in coming weeks. Bob Hawke and Paul Keating and their governments modernised the Australian economy, paving the way for an unprecedented period of recession-free economic growth and job creation. Bob's consensus-style approach of bringing together the trade union movement and the business community boosted job opportunities while increasing the social wage through Medicare and extra financial support for low-income families. Together with his highly talented cabinets, he foresaw the Asian century and positioned Australia to take full advantage of it through a program of sweeping economic reforms. Among his proudest achievements were large increases in the proportion of children finishing high school, his role in ending apartheid in South Africa, and his successful international campaign to protect Antarctica from mining. He abhorred racism and bigotry. His father, the Reverend Clem Hawke, told Bob that if you believed in the fatherhood of God, then you must also believe in the brotherhood of man. Bob would add today the sisterhood of women. Bob was loved dearly by his family and so many friends and colleagues. We will miss him. The golden bowl is broken.
A tribute paid by Blanche Del Puget to the late Bob Hawke. Hawke took the leadership in early '83. Stephen, as we know, he beat Malcolm Fraser in March '83. He beat Andrew Peacock in '84, John Howard in '87 and Andrew Peacock again in 1990. That's a fair effort. We didn't like him all that much, but God, he was hard to beat. In fact, we never beat him. No one ever beat him, and it wasn't until the 30th of May 1991 that an ambitious Paul Keating first announced a challenge to Bob Hawke, which saw Keating take the leadership at the end of '91 and ultimately winning the unwinnable election in '93. Keating did. Hawke remained a loyal Labor figure for the entirety of his life.